As a quadriplegic, it must be frustrating for you. Someone who liked to get things done with their hands.
Here's the thing. 4 guys murdered my wife.
Upgrade is a 2018 science fiction film, written and directed by Leigh Whannell, who is mostly known for his works on both the Saw and Insidious franchises, which may explain some of the film's more gruesome elements. It stars Logan Marshall Green as Gray Trace, a technophobic mechanic in the near future who becomes paralyzed after a terrible mugging, which also results in the death of his wife. Gray is later approached by an eccentric billionaire who offers him a chance to walk again by implanting a chip into his spine called STEM. However, Gray comes to find that STEM has a mind of its own, not only allowing Gray to walk, but also granting him superhuman abilities. With the help of STEM, Gray makes it his mission to hunt down the men who murdered his wife and get revenge.
We'll need a plan.
I got this.
This doesn't seem like a well-thought-out plan. I need your permission to operate independently.
Permission granted!
Thank you.
At its core, the film is a cyberpunk story, with elements reminiscent of RoboCop, Death Wish, and The $6 Million Man, although there is an element of a superhero origin story, or perhaps a deconstruction of it. At first glance, you'd assume that Upgrade is a simple revenge tale, but there's a lot of twists and turns in the story that really veer it off into something else. And that ambiguous aspect of it is really solidified by the ending, which actually left me pretty surprised. I also like how there's a lot of moral thought put into the film. Gray is not an action hero. As a matter of fact, he's just a simple mechanic thrown into a violent situation, so whenever he's forced to commit gruesome acts of violence, he's always regretting it in some aspect. But the violence on display here is usually very brief and as well as kinetic. If it weren't for the fact that the main character's body is controlled by an AI, then this type of action could easily be criticized as feeling stiff and a bit cartoony, but I feel that Green's performance really lends well to keep it all grounded, so there's even some good characterization in the action as well. I'm not very familiar with Leigh Whannell's filmography. I've never been too keen to watch the Saw films as they're just not my cup of tea, and I've also never seen Insidious 3, which was Whannell's directorial debut, as well as the other films. But he definitely shows a lot of talent here. Despite its budget, the cinematography and direction of Upgrade feels very adequate for its quality. One of the first things I noticed is that whenever STEM wasn't in full control of Gray's body, the direction almost felt handheld and clunky, but whenever STEM was in full control, the direction felt more sleeker and precise. Making Gray a technophobe is also a great way to introduce the audience to this world. In a weird way, Gray is seeing this world for the first time as well, making him pretty easier to latch onto as a protagonist. What surprised me the most was the film's emotional core, an element which a lot of action films seem to be lacking nowadays. There's also enough scenes showing the weight of Gray's grief, scenes that are strengthened from solid direction by Whannell. It's also strengthened from decent acting from Logan Marshall Green. I really enjoyed his performance in this. He carried the film with a lot of charisma. There were some parts where I felt his delivery was a bit off, but for the most part, he really showed me that he can pull off both the emotional and action beats very convincingly. And he's also a very good Tom Hardy clone. So great job, Hollywood. And now it's time for the negatives. Upgrade is a fun picture, but no movie is without sin. There was a chase sequence that I felt was a bit lackluster in terms of direction, and sometimes the pacing can be a bit off, although I have to admit that the pacing really does start to get up when STEM is introduced. As a matter of fact, the relationship between STEM and Gray is probably the best part of the film. He's like an American Jarvis to Gray's working-class Iron Man, and their banter is pretty great.
Let me know if you need my help, Gray.
STEM! Help!
I need your permission to operate independently.
Permission granted!
Thank you.
Okay, STEM, what are we doing, man?
Just relax.
I also thought that there was a scene involving one of the main villains that really should have been left in the cutting room floor. Not only is the scene corny, but it involves some really unnecessary CGI, and really adds nothing for the overall story. I wonder as to why the screenwriter didn't want to omit this from the... Oh. Right. And of course there's a plot hole, which is fine. Every movie has a plot hole. Luckily, the film has enough positives to outweigh the negative. Although, when you start to look at the plot hole, the whole story seems a bit redundant. That being said though, I really enjoyed Upgrade. It's a solid sci-fi picture and would really be good for a weekend viewing. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would actually be open for a sequel. The ending did leave things a bit open-ended, and I would like to see where the story progresses from here.
I cannot allow us to be killed. We are going to finish the job we started.